In the grand history of the Walt Disney Company, there are names that echo through the ages. Walt Disney, Roy Disney, Bob Iger, and then there's this guy. This is Ron Miller, a man whose life journey took him from the football fields of USC to the highest office at Disney, all while being known mostly as Walt Disney's son-in-law. But was he simply the family connection gone wrong? Or was there more to Ron Miller's story than most people remember? If you're new here, I'm Calamity Pooh, and around here, we deep dive into theme parks, Disney history, ride-throughs, and travel reviews. Today, we're kicking off a brand new series where we take a look at every Disney CEO and rank them on our definitive Disney CEO tier list. Some were visionaries and others, not so much. We're starting this series off with a name that's often forgotten, even though he was directly linked to Walt himself, Ron Miller. His story is one of unexpected opportunities, bold decisions, and ultimately a dramatic fall from the top. So let's get into it. Ronald William Miller was born on April 17, 1933 in Los Angeles, California. His early aspirations were far from Hollywood. He was drawn to the gridiron. As a 6'4", 200-pound end for the USC Trojans, Miller showcased determination and athleticism. In 1956, he was drafted by the Los Angeles Rams, fulfilling a personal dream. However, his NFL career was brief. During a game attended by his father-in-law, Walt Disney, Miller suffered a severe hit from Dick Night Train Lane, rendering him unconscious. Concerned for his family's future, Walt advised Ron to leave football and join the Disney Company, a decision that would alter Ron's path entirely. Marrying Diane Disney in 1954, Ron found himself deeply intertwined with the Disney family legacy. His entry into the company wasn't a leap into an executive role, but rather a humble beginning, working as a liaison between WED Enterprises and Disneyland in 1954. In this role, he facilitated communication between Walt's creative Imagineers and the construction teams building Disneyland. It was a behind-the-scenes position, but one that gave him invaluable insight into the complexities of theme park design and operations. Following his military service, Ron returned to Disney with a renewed sense of purpose and started working on film sets, beginning as a second assistant director on Old Yeller in 1957. This was no glamorous role though. It involved the logistical grunt work of managing scenes, sets, and schedules. But Ron took it in stride, learning the craft of filmmaking from the ground up. As he gained experience, he transitioned into producing, taking on projects like Escape to Witch Mountain, Pete's Dragon, and the sci-fi thriller The Black Hole. His films weren't exactly Disney's crown jewels, but they reflected Ron's willingness to explore new genres and expand into Disney's live-action offerings. The Black Hole was even one of Disney's first forays into darker, more mature storytelling, a precursor to the kinds of risks the company would take under Touchstone Pictures. Ron's time in film production revealed his drive to push the company beyond its traditional family-oriented content, an ambition that would later shape some of his most significant contributions as CEO. His career trajectory within Disney showed that he wasn't just coasting on family ties, he was working his way up, project by project, film by film. Ron and Diane's union was steadfast, built on a foundation of shared values, family, and a deep respect for the Disney legacy. Married in 1954, they raised 7 children together, balancing the demands of Ron's evolving career at Disney with a strong and supportive family life. Despite the pressures of being a part of one of the world's most famous families, Ron and Diane maintained a relatively grounded lifestyle, focusing on their children and personal passions. Diane in particular was fiercely dedicated to preserving and honouring her father's legacy. She was known to be a strong advocate for keeping Walt's original vision alive, especially in an era where the company was rapidly evolving. Her passion culminated in the establishment of the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco, which opened in 2009. The museum became a heartfelt tribute to her father's life and work, offering an intimate look at Walt Disney's journey from small-town dreamer to a global icon. Ron was a strong supporter of Diane's efforts, and together they poured time and resources into the project that celebrated Walt's legacy. The museum stands today as one of the most comprehensive and personal collections of Disney history, and honestly, it's definitely on my bucket list. I mean, where else can you dive so deeply into the life of the man who created it all? By the early 1980s, the Walt Disney Company was at a crossroads. The animation department, the heart and soul of Disney, was faltering. After a golden age of animated classics, the studio struggled to produce hits, with films like The Fox and the Hound underperforming and internal tensions rising among the animators. Many of Disney's legendary 9 old men had retired or were nearing retirement, leaving a talent vacuum that the company struggled to fill. Meanwhile, theme park attendance plateaued. Disneyland and Walt Disney World still drew crowds, but there was a growing sense that the parks were stagnating, lacking the innovation that Walt had once championed. New attractions were slow to develop, and guests began noticing. The company's revenue streams felt increasingly fragile. Investors too were restless. With Disney's stock price languishing and its reputation as a creative powerhouse waning, the company became vulnerable to the corporate raiders, who saw an opportunity to break it apart and sell it off for its valuable assets. And in 1983, amid this turmoil, the board appointed Ron Miller as CEO. And while some saw this move as nepotism, after all, he was Walt Disney's son-in-law, others hoped that Ron's steady hand and years of experience within the company might bring fresh ideas and direction. And to his credit, he didn't just sit back and coast. Recognizing the need to diversify Disney's offerings beyond family-friendly content, Ron established Touchstone Pictures in 1984. This new label gave Disney the freedom to produce more mature, PG-13 rated films without tarnishing its wholesome brand. It was a bold move, and it paid off. Touchstone's first release, Splash, starring Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah, became a massive hit. The studio would go on to produce critical and commercial successes like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Pretty Woman, and Dead Poets Society, films that would have never fit under the traditional Disney banner. But Ron didn't stop there. He also spearheaded the launch of the Disney Channel in 1983. At a time where cable television was still growing, creating a dedicated channel for Disney content was a forward-thinking move. It gave Disney a direct line into families' homes and eventually became a cornerstone of the company's media empire, introducing generations of kids to shows like the Mickey Mouse Club and later hits like Liz McGuire and Even Stevens. And look, even though it took a while for pay TV and cable to catch on in Australia, and we didn't have the Disney Channel at first, we had things like Saturday Disney, which was like weekly shows that were taken directly from the Disney Channel. And when pay TV kicked off, eventually Disney Channel reached us, and it had the same generational effect that it did everywhere else that got it. Despite these innovative strides, Miller's leadership was far from universally praised. He was often perceived as indecisive and lacked the authoritative presence needed to navigate Disney through the turbulent waters of the early 1980s. Critics argued that while he had good ideas, he struggled to execute them effectively and couldn't rally the company around a unified vision. Things came to a head in 1984. Corporate raiders led by Saul Steinberg attempted a hostile takeover of Disney, planning to dismantle the company and sell off its parts. This triggered a massive internal battle. The Disney board, desperate to defend the company, decided it was time for a change at the top. Ron Miller was ousted in a dramatic shareholder revolt, making way for Michael Eisner and Frank Wells, the duo who would go on to transform Disney in ways few could have ever imagined. Miller's exit was messy and painful, but it marked the end of an era and the beginning of Disney's resurgence. Following his departure from Disney, Ron and Diane sought a fresh start away from the high-stakes world of corporate entertainment. They relocated to the picturesque Napa Valley, drawn by a shared passion for wine and a desire to create something uniquely their own. In 1981, they founded Silverado Vineyards, purchasing a beautiful estate in the heart of wine country. It was a bold move, swapping film sets and boardrooms for vineyards and tasting rooms, but one that would become a defining chapter of their lives. It wasn't just another vanity project either. Ron and Diane took the venture seriously, working along experienced vintners to create high-quality wines. They focused on sustainable and environmentally conscious winemaking practices, championing methods that respected the land and the rich agricultural traditions of Napa Valley. Their commitment to quality and sustainability helped elevate Silverado Vineyards to prominence, earning it a reputation for producing some of the region's finest Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Sauvignon Blanc. Sorry if I said that wrong. I'm not a wine guy. And in Australia, we just call it Cab Sauv, Sauv Blanc, Merlot. Ron found solace in the slower pace of winemaking. After the turbulence of his time at Disney, the vineyard offered a peaceful, hands-on outlet for his creativity and business acumen. Diane too found joy in the project, especially as it allowed them to work together on something far removed from the intense spotlight of the Disney empire. Hell, I've recently discovered that I don't mind a Shiraz, and Silverado apparently don't make those. Maybe one day I'll expand my taste a bit and get into what they offer. Until then, you'll have to take the word of other wine types in that they make a good job. Outside of winemaking, Ron remained quietly involved in projects related to the Disney legacy, particularly supporting Diane's efforts with the Walt Disney Family Museum. He maintained a respectful distance from the corporate world that had once been his life, focusing instead on family, community, and of course the winery. He passed away on February 9th of 2019 at the age of 85. His death marked the end of a life that had navigated the intersections of sports, entertainment, family, and business. Though his tenure at Disney remains a subject of debate, viewed by some as a period of stagnation and others by a time of bold, if flawed, experimentation, there's no denying that he left an imprint. Initiatives like Touchstone Pictures and the Disney Channel were seeds planted during his leadership, growing into some of the company's most successful ventures. In the peaceful rows of Silverado Vineyards, far from the pressures of Hollywood, Ron Miller found a second act, one that, much like his time at Disney, was built on passion, dedication, and a willingness to take risks. Though overshadowed by his successes, Miller's contributions to Disney's diversification and growth resonate to this day. So where does he land on the definitive Disney CEO tier list? For me, it's pretty complicated. On one hand, it's made some undeniably bold moves. He greenlit Touchstone Pictures, which allowed Disney to break out of its family-friendly mold and explore edgier, more mature content. Without that move, we wouldn't have Splash, Pretty Woman, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a number of different movies that are classics. Films that expanded Disney's reach into new markets and helped diversify its brand, and also launching the Disney Channel, which, let's be honest, became an absolute powerhouse in the world of kids' entertainment. Generations of kids grew up with that channel. It was a game changer. But here's where it gets tricky. Despite all these innovations, Ron struggled with one thing that Disney needed most of the time: strong, decisive leadership. The company was in a vulnerable state, teetering on the edge of irrelevance, and Ron, for all his good intentions, wasn't the leader who could bring it back to glory. He was often seen as indecisive, lacking that creative spark and business acumen that Disney desperately needed during those challenging years. And then there's the issue of perception. Whether fair or not, a lot of people saw Ron's rise to CEO as pure nepotism. He was Walt Disney's son-in-law after all, and that shadow loomed large over his tenure. It made it harder for him to command respect within the company and in the broader business world. So where does that leave him on the tier list? I'm going to place Ron Miller on the D tier. Not a total disaster after all. Touchstone and the Disney Channel are still major parts of Disney's legacy. But his inability to steady the ship during turbulent times ultimately cost him the job. He was a transitional figure in Disney history, someone who planted the seeds for future success but couldn't quite see them through. He's far from the worst, but he's definitely far from the best. He's a complicated figure in Disney's leadership saga, that's for sure. And that's the story of Ron Miller, the forgotten CEO. What do you think? Was he unfairly pushed out? Was he never the right guy for the job? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Next time, we're diving into another chapter of Disney's wild leadership saga. I'm not saying who just yet, but trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you real soon.